So welcome to this webinar on the practice model solution. And this is one of my favorite topics and one of the more unusual topics that we talk about in the Dominate Your Market program. And it's, from our viewpoint, a really powerful strategy to allow you to focus your marketing and practice management into a model that really allows you to dominate your market more effectively. So the idea behind this is really to think about how your marketing and your practice management strategy need to align together. And I've seen a lot of practices where they do not align together. In fact, I see people do some really crazy things where their marketing doesn't match up with their practice management. And after going through this model, you'll probably see a lot more between your friends, your colleagues, and maybe even your own practice where you see misalignment for the model. So I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time doing a lot of setup around this, because the big picture around this is that we're really in the industry that's called professional services. So what I mean by that is that we're what Peter Drucker, the management guru, calls knowledge workers. And a knowledge worker is a professional whose asset is ultimately their judgment, their knowledge, their expertise. And they're paid to think for a living. They're paid to solve people's problems. And consequently, because of that, it's very hard for a knowledge worker to grow their business in particular ways. It's not like they can create a knowledge packet to download off the internet. It's not like they can create a widget of some form to sell. Now, some people do that, but quite frankly, it's very, very difficult. And the model of a professional services business requires different thinking. And from my viewpoint, there's a lot of complexity out there. Since you're selling services one-to-one, since you're really kind of messed up in your own mind because you only view the practice from what I call the inside out. You really don't get too many opportunities to view it from the customer's perspective. And most lawyers believe that because they're the best at what they do technically, or quite frankly in their marketplace, they are the best at technically the type of law they practice, that they really don't that's kind of a blind spot. They really don't think more effectively about their model because of this. And they sometimes will have an overinflated value of their practice consequently. They think their practice might be worth millions when they retire. And most professional practices, in my eyes, are really created by accident with very, very little thought or conscious determination around what is a great practice to get into from a business viewpoint. An example of this is a family law lawyer who maybe practiced for 5 years as a family law associate. Well, you don't see them jumping into high-end tax planning. What they do is they turn around and go into family law. And so that's kind of a default process. You know, they just know that type of law, so they're going to continue to practice that law. And so my experience of that is those types of practices are, for lack of a better word, kind of created by accident. There's not a conscious thought by why they want to go into that particular area of practice. And when you start looking around for help, a lot of the consultative literature and books are not aimed at professional services. They're aimed at other companies, other types of businesses. And then ultimately you throw in the fact that knowledge workers, especially lawyers, are autonomous and self-managing. They don't really play well with others. I will concede that that's one of the challenges I have had over the years. I've had partners, I've had associates, but it's really, really difficult to manage a professional with their own book of business because they don't have to be managed, nor will they choose to be managed. Ideally, those are some of the challenges I've seen that the model helps you think through and solve. If we're able to apply the model, my experience is that you're going to be able to design a practice that fits your life and not the other way around. You're going to find a way to focus your activities to produce the fastest and greatest results. You're going to quit wasting time going to CLE programs that are not relevant to your practice. And you'll understand that not only the optimal practice management models, but the optimal practice marketing models for your model. And ultimately, you're going to have a really, really competitive advantage in the marketplace. And from my viewpoint, once you figure out which model fits you, it's going to impact marketing, management, hiring, and client service decisions. It's going to require you to focus your thinking in a very laser-like way about how to operate your practice. And ideally, if you understand the model and you understand the core concepts of the model, you'll be able to price your services with a lot more confidence, insight, and profitability. So with that being said, let's go directly into the model. So in my eyes, there are really a couple of interesting viewpoints to consider when you think about the practice model itself. First is, how do your referral sources view you? You know, what are their perceptions of you? And, you know, what are their prospects' perceptions of you when they start interacting with your firm? And if you're not sure, how do you explore their views of you? And the real breakthrough for me in understanding and thinking about this is a wonderful quote out of David Maister's book, Managing the Professional Services Firm. And in his book, he says, in any professional services business, there are 3 key benefits that clients seek. First, expertise, which is, you know, intellectual knowledge, like how to solve the problem. Experience, which means you solve the problem over and over and over. And efficiency. And efficiency is a really, really nice work for value conscious. They're very concerned about the turnaround, the pricing, like, is this a good deal? And from our viewpoint, and I think Maister does a great job with identifying this, in the marketplace, the relative priority a prospect or client can put on this can vary dramatically. So you can have one client come in with their greatest concerns, efficiency and value consciousness, which is going to be driven more by pricing, and the next client comes in, their concern is going to be expertise, and you may have a client who's got all 3 kind of jumbled up in their head. So the question becomes, if that's the case, how do you sort that out? What's a great way of doing that? And ultimately, starting to ask yourself, you know, what is the primary driver for these 3? You know, what is it? And it really is driven, from my viewpoint, by 2 concepts. And these concepts are so elegant, so simple, so blatantly obvious that most lawyers will never, ever, ever take the time to think about them, communicate to the client, and talk to the client about this. The first one is the client's stress. And there's a couple different ways of cutting this. It could be their stress, their fear, their anxiety, what they're worried about. And usually what I do is I recommend that you break it down by issue. You're not saying, you know, are you worried about your case? No, you say, are you worried about, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, what you're concerned about the custody issues. On a scale of 1 to 10, what you're concerned about going through discovery. On a scale of 1 to 10. And you take the key issues that the client's communicating that they have anxiety, stress about, and take them apart and have the client score them. Now, in my experience, when the clients score them, their scores will vary from one level to another. So in some cases, the client score may be high. Other cases, the client score may be low. But what that does for you is it tells you in a very, very simple and straightforward manner is how to prioritize your time and your communication with the client about the issues. The second one is urgency. How quickly would the client like these things to get done? 10 being, I want it done yesterday, 1 being when you can get to it. And so you're really looking at how quickly would you like to resolve this problem. Well, this is an important question because the client's coming in, they're talking to you about stress, then they're talking to you about urgency. So it allows you to think through from the client's viewpoint in a very assessed manner. The client's doing it from an objective, their own self-assessed manner. They're telling you what their concerns are and how to score them. Now, in my perspective, if you look at this, if you understand the client's stress and the client's urgency, this is ultimately going to be the key to understanding each of the different models. And the models are driven first and foremost by the stress and urgency of the client and the referral source's perception. So you may think that your client should have a different stress level, or you may think the client may have a different urgency level or should have a different urgency level. But it really doesn't matter what you think. What it really matters is what the client thinks. And what we're looking for is a way of appreciating and understanding where the clients are coming from and how that applies to our model. So from my perspective, this is the ultimate trap. If you do not appreciate that it's client's perception, and if you do not spend time and effort in understanding the client's perception, the client's stress, and the client's urgency, you are missing a golden opportunity. You are driving right by a huge, huge opportunity to learn so much about your the perception of you in the practice in the marketplace. It's just an amazing golden opportunity. And I see a lot of lawyers not take advantage of it because they don't do this silly exercise. And my experience is most clients don't find it silly. You find this self-assessment scoring going on in medical practices every day. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain? You know, they have all kinds of different diagnostic tools where they have people self-assess their pain. So you have to really appreciate that you have to slow down here and spend some time getting the client to help communicate to you about their perception of stress and urgency. Great. Now, with that being said, this is number 1. This is the expert's expert model. The expert's expert model is kind of dangerous because most clients, most lawyers will fall into the trap of believing that they're in this category because they perceive themselves to be technically the expert in the marketplace. But really, it matters what the client says. I don't care how many certifications you have. I don't care how many books you've written. It doesn't matter to me. What really matters is what the client says. So if the client comes in and they think their problem's high risk to them, they believe the issue is unusual, it seems very complicated to them, and in their world everything's on the line, the client's going to perceive you as the expert's expert. Now, you may perceive that other people are actually going to be better experts than you, but the truth is this client thinks that you're the go-to person. And my experience is the client's going to communicate a stress level probably no less than 7, but usually around a 10. And so if you go through and say, well, what's your stress level on this? The client goes a 10. What's your stress level on this? A 10. What's your stress level on this? A 10. Then you know the client's probably looking at you as a go-to person. Like you're the expert's expert. And then the second question is, well, how fast do you want to get this resolved? You know, well, if their stress level's high, they're going to want to get done usually quickly because they have such anxiety around it. So their urgency factor is going to be probably in excess of a 7, typically going to be a 10. So they're telling you fast and high stress. So to them, you are like an emergency room doctor. You're someone that can help them deal with a lot of pain and reduce some stress very, very quickly. So once again, this is the client's perception of you. You may perceive someone else as better, but they really are perceiving you as the expert. So you want to appreciate and understand the client's perception when it comes to how you respond and move from this point forward with the matter. Now, if you've discovered that you're in the expert model, then how do you manage this firm? How do you grow this firm? So you have to think about this. What's your pricing going to be like? So when you set fees, what are they going to be? You know, how critical is it your hourly rate or your fixed pricing in this marketplace? Well, if you're perceived by the client as dealing with a high stress, fast turnaround problem, and the client perceives that you are the go-to person, what should your pricing be? You know, what are they going to expect? Well, generally speaking, your pricing is going to be higher than someone else in the marketplace, meaning that you're not going to try and sell, well, we have the best deal in town for you. We have 2-for-1 Tuesdays, or, you know, we have half off today because, you know, today we're desperately in need of clients, so we're having half off of retainers. No. That's going to completely mess with the client's mind because no one would imagine the best in town being the cheapest in town. You know, no one would want their brain surgeon to offer 2-for-1 brain surgeries. You know, they want to know that this is the best, the most renowned, the most well-respected brain surgeon around, and not the best deal in town. In fact, I think it would mess with somebody if you gave them too much of a deal when you were trying to position yourself as the expert's expert. The example I always like to use, just because it still amuses me, and continues to amuse me, which is Michael Jackson. When Michael Jackson was arrested for being alleged pedophile, when he called Jerry Spence and Johnny Cochran, he didn't get them on a billable rate argument. He didn't say, look, you know, Jerry, you need to come down $100 an hour because Johnny Cochran is willing to do the case at $500 an hour, but you're at $600 an hour. I need to get you down. No, he didn't do that. He basically bet the ranch, literally put everything that he owned on the line to his legal team because he didn't want to go to prison. So he literally bet everything he had, on that legal team to get him out of prison. So the expert's expert, these guys were perceived as the go-to people. They were perceived as the best in the marketplace. Now, if you're going to have a expert's expert model, how do you market this firm? Well, the key strategy here is you have to market the lawyer, not the firm. So you're not going to be doing a lot of branding of the law firm per se, and that's a classic mistake I see a lot of lawyers do in the expert-expert model, because they don't, the clients don't hire firms. They, in this case, they really go to the lawyers, and they look for the lawyers, and they market, and so they're looking for the best lawyer, not the best firm. So what you see here is that most of the marketing will be professional to professional. It could be from lawyer to lawyer, it could be from lawyer to CPA, it could be lawyer to financial planner, but more than likely it's going to be from the expert lawyer to the potential referral sources. You're going to see the lawyer writing blogs, books, articles. Presentations are critical, and getting known as the expert's expert in the profession is ultimately the status that this lawyer wants to obtain. Now, we have to, when we look at this, the marketing is really important, because a lot of times when we see people market here, they get so hung up in talking about the expertise of the firm. And when you're hiring the expert, you don't care about the firm, you care about the expert. If they're a good enough expert, they're going to have a great support team. So knowing they have a great support team is going to be usually a given or assumed thing by a lot of people. And when you do this type of practice, the marketing demands will be broader across the marketplace. And a support team, including a writer, social media team, PR, and blogger, may be a far wiser investment than search engine optimization, because we're really trying to expand this lawyer's reputation among potential referral sources, not the reach among potential consumers. Now, the practice management here is going to be a little different, because our practice management's got to be, generally our teams may be smaller, because our leverage may not be as much, because in this case the associates are going to be fewer, highly credentialed, specialized. They're going to play a supportive role to the expert, because no one's going to want the associates to do their cases. Everyone's going to want the expert to do their cases. Now, your client volume may be smaller, but your revenue per case may be significantly more and profitable, assuming that you manage your pricing well. Now, the interesting thing about this is a lot of lawyers love this model. They're very intoxicated by this model. They're seduced by the possibility of known as the expert. But when you look at this practice, if you're trying to sell your practice, or you think your practice is going to be of value when you exit, how easy would it be to sell this practice? Well, if you think about it, this is a terrible practice to sell. The value of it's going to be very little, because when the partner leaves, the partner is going to take their expertise, their reputation, and the practice itself is going to probably have a nominal value. Now, there's some things you can do to increase the value of this is your model, but understanding this is your model and understanding how to grow this practice and manage this practice and set up for sell is very, very important. That's why we think the practice model solution is a critical strategy to think about in dominating your market. Thinking about this, you may want to look around your marketplace and think about who would be a great example of a expert. Well, I already talked about one, Jerry Spence, and the late Johnny Cochran was really, expert. But there's lawyers out there that market to other lawyers all the time from the expert's expert model. So just, think about who you know and who that could be in that role. Number two is the experienced practitioner model. And the experienced practitioner model is a very intriguing model, because in this case the client's concerned about the issue, but they're not stressed out. They're not going, oh my God, I can't sleep, but they're worried. And they don't want an attorney that's going to take a blank sheet approach, like they've never seen this problem before. They want to know that the lawyer's got a lot of experience and the firm has a lot of experience. They don't want this to be a blank sheet creative solution. They want to know that you've seen this sucker a whole bunch of times and you know how to deal with this particular issue. And the client's concern, they're not going to be stressed. Well, they'll be a little stressed, but they're not going to be like really, really stressed out about this. Their stress level is probably going to be somewhere between a 4 to 7, maybe they say an 8, but they just want to know that you've got a reputation for fixing this. They're going to want resolution, but they're typically not going to pay to expedite this case. They'll let you expedite it for free, but they're not necessarily going to pay extra to expedite this work. They're going to, be okay with you working on it in whatever standard timelines that you usually have. Now, the pricing in this particular case is interesting because the client's willing to pay a premium for the experience, knowing that you've been there and done that, but they're not going to pay a pricing model. They're not going to pay what they would for an expert case. They're willing to pay a little bit more. There may be a 15, 20%, even much as a 30% premium above someone who's willing to do the work on a bargain, on a bargain or a cheaper approach. But this becomes a really, really important component of this practice. So the important thing about this from my perspective and coaching you and having you think about this, pricing and understanding how to sell the pricing becomes a very, very crucial skill. Here, the ability of the lawyer to sell the pricing and communicate the value of the services really is going to be a huge differential in the profit margins of the cases. So if you look at this type of a case, I'm more concerned about the lawyer's I'm less concerned about the lawyer's legal technical skills here as I am on their basic business skills of sales. Can they explain why that premium's worth it to this client? Great. Even though the engagement for the client will require, in theory, less diagnostic work, the client's still going to expect, high quality services. And even though this may be a professionally demanding and predictable outcome, in most of these practices, the demand to do high caliber work doesn't diminish because the client's pricing diminishes. So this type of practice will require a little bit more, if not a greater commitment to stronger systemization. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the marketing of this practice, the key strategy to marketing this, which is distinct from the expert, is that we're marketing the firm's collective experience. We're marketing the firm's ability to solve this type of problem. So we're not marketing the lawyer per se now. We're switching more and more to the team, the firm itself. And if that's the case, we're probably going to see, instead of marketing going to other professionals per se, we may see marketing go directly to the prospects, meaning directly to potential clients rather than to referral sources. Educational workshops, DVDs, webinars, books, blogs become very, very crucial to this type of practice because we're trying to educate the clients and decrease our sales process through the education process. And marketing to past clients becomes very important. So you're starting to market to consistent referral sources and consistent past clients because they're sources of business. Now, when you market this type of practice, the experienced practitioner model, you must market the firm's collective reputation. So we start seeing brochures, handouts, webinars, information on the website talking about past results, statistics, and evidence of the firm's ability to solve this type of issue effectively. And the way you really leverage your marketing and increase your profitability here is the more that you can pre-educate the client becomes a key strategy. So before the lawyer actually meets with the client one-on-one in their initial, your effectiveness of marketing and your effectiveness of pre-education and will really impact your profitability. So the more that we front-load the education prior to that one-on-one meeting, the more powerful it'll be for the client and more powerful the profits will be for the firm. A lot of firms that are the experienced practitioner model, the lawyer uses about 80% of the initial meeting as an educational process. They may rationalize that as a bonding process, but my experience is really not a bonding process. It's an educational process to try and get the client to a buying decision. So you have to think about where you're at on your practice and what your model looks like here. And ultimately, what you see the experienced practitioner start to do over time is build a steady, consistent client base and a steady, consistent referral sources. And that becomes increasingly important to the long-term longevity of the firm. Now, one of the fun things to think about this is that if you're going to have this type of practice, since the problems are similar, your profit margins are going to be tighter. So learning to use paraprofessionals, such as paralegals, legal assistants, become critical to drive your profit margins. Leveraging of systems becomes crucial. So finding, training, managing, and retaining paraprofessionals, non-lawyers, effectively becomes a key strategy for growth for this firm. So you can be the world's greatest marketing whiz for the experienced practitioner model, but if you are not training, managing, and running your team well, this model will always be frustrating because you'll feel like you're running really, really fast, but not getting ahead. So the two critical points, and I'm going to hit them again, first and foremost, hiring, training strategies are key. And the more consistent, formal training you do both inside your firm and outside the firm using resources like Atticus, the more systematized you are, the more defined internal roles you have, the more profitable your firm will be. And number two, teamwork becomes crucial. The need to lever effective and efficient services becomes a real critical element for this practice. So you are seeing that the lawyer will actually make their money and their margins by being a great hiring and training trainer or manager of people. In addition to that, their ability to lead and manage their people becomes really crucial to this firm being profitable. Great. So when you go to value this, when we go to value this firm upon selling it, what's this firm worth? Well, interestingly enough, this firm is going to be a lot easier to sell and a lot more interesting because the value of the practice is going to be higher. We have paraprofessionals. We have great systems. We have a steady client base. The marketing production systems are crucial because it's really not going to be as dependent on the lawyer as the owner. We may have a lot more systematized marketing processes. So when we look at this, the value of this firm is actually higher. And you may want to think around, think about what examples you can think of practices that fall under the experienced practitioner model. With that, I'm going to move to the last model, which is the commodity practice model. And this is a very interesting model because the client comes in and their perception is that the issue is a low-risk issue. It is a simple problem. And the client will use things like, well, my situation is straightforward and simple. This is a simple problem. And so the client is really telling you straight up that this is not going to be something they're going to spend a lot of money on. They don't perceive this as high risk. And they will tell you their stress levels 1 to 3, and they'll probably tell you that their urgency, although it's important, their urgency factors are going to be usually under 5. So they may say it'd be 1 to 2 to 3, they would like to get something done, but it's not a rush. They're not going to even consider paying anything to expedite these types of cases. They expect a decent turnaround, but they're not going to really pay for something to get done quicker or faster because they don't have a stress factor around it. Now, the intriguing thing about this is that most professionals believe that they would never be caught ever in portions of this practice. But in my experience, a lot of solo practitioners and firms will fall into this category. And where you see this is where clients come in and they really don't care about how many books you've written. They really don't care about whether you're board certified. They really don't care if they're meeting with you. They're really not that anxious about it because in their mind, they're only concerned about a couple things. And for them, the key driver is going to be price, reliability, which is consistent service, and turnaround. And competitive pricing becomes the driver. So your expertise is a little concern. They're going to presume you know what you're doing, but ultimately what's going to drive them and get them intrigued is your pricing. And so in this practice, price. Everything is about the price. So what you see is the marketing and services are going to be price driven. We're not going to market about the firm. We're not going to market how brilliant our lawyers are. They don't care. They don't care. What they really care about is what's the deal. And so you're going to see fixed pricing and flat pricing is key. Website and search engine optimization becomes a brilliant strategy here because all the client wants to know is where can they get a deal. And there has to be a lot of free tools, a lot of free downloads, a lot of free things for the clients to play with to appreciate what you're doing to pre-sell them. And there's got to be a lot of highly targeted marketing messages, whether it's specialized brochures or specialized marketing pieces, but ultimately they're going to be talking about pricing. Why do you get a deal with us? What's so special about us from a price perspective? Not how brilliant you are, but what kind of deal can you cut them? Now, one of the key elements about this is understanding that if price is what it's about, then the owner of this firm has to understand that they're going to be under constant price pressure. They're going to always feel price pressure. They're never going to be at a point where they feel that their margins are protected. The nature of this firm is always trying to figure out how do we deal with the next wave of price cuts. So if this is the case, there's three strategies. The first is, number one, this firm has to have a tremendous understanding of how to use technology efficiently and effectively in the practice. This may be a complete paperless firm. They may have the use of technology down to an art form. They may even have an IT team on staff versus outside, because this firm's key to profitability will be their efficiency. Number two is paraprofessionals are running the show. We can't afford lawyers as managers. We can't afford lawyers in key roles. This is going to be driven ultimately by paraprofessionals. And then focused management becomes a difference between profit and loss. Legal skills are always important, but in this firm you can be the greatest lawyer in the world and it's not going to matter if you can't manage. This lawyer's ability to manage, or at least hire and get managers to work in the firm, becomes far more crucial than their legal skills. Sad to say, but true. So from a management perspective, greater management administration become absolutely crucial. Managing unfocused processes and short interval measurements for quality assurances and performance is key. The managers have to be highly disciplined and focused, and training needs to be exceptional inside this firm because that's where they're going to make their money. Now, interestingly, when we go to sell this practice, what is the value of this practice? What is the value of this firm? And how easy would it be to sell this practice? In my experience, the value of the practice is high, because the ownership of the firm is worth a lot more. The values in the systems, marketing procedures, everything dealing with the team and the management structure of the firm, because interestingly enough, the more powerfully this firm operates without the lawyers, the more it's worth. You can look at this lawyer from a couple of different ways. I mean, this practice from a couple of different ways, but ultimately, this practice is going to be worth a lot more. Why? Because the lawyers are irrelevant. They don't care about the lawyers. They care about the price. And if you can deliver a high-quality service at a good price point, although it's a commodity, this practice is worth a lot more because the lawyer is irrelevant. So the paradox, the biggest takeaway out of this, and the more aha or insight that you may be looking at right now is, man, the smarter you are and the bigger of an expert you are, the more crucial you are to your firm, ultimately the less the firm is worth. The opposite of that, which is equally true, the more relevant you are as the owner to the practice, the more the business is worth. So here we have this amazing concept where we're trained to be brilliant technicians through law school, and in order to have a very effective and valuable practice, the greatest thing that you can possibly do is make yourself irrelevant. So the purpose of the practice model solution is for you to think about which of these models is something that you'd want to build your practice around. Now, there's three uniqueness strategies that I'm going to talk for about 1 or 2 minutes, and these are just variables. They can be added to any of the models, and each of these are, just uniqueness. So a niche is usually a product or service aimed at a particular problem, not a particular type of problem. So, a niche would be like I just work with the 8 DUI cases. That would be a uniqueness strategy. So you could be an expert, and you would add a uniqueness strategy as a niche. Another one could be a specific client focus. Now, a specific client focus is a little different. Whereas a niche may be only do DUI cases, a client-specific focus will be a particular type of client, like you only work with business owners or physicians or real estate developers or high-tech startups, but you're going to really be focused on a particular type of client, not a particular type of problem. You may be dealing with physicians' problems from starting a practice to death, and that would be focusing on the client. Whereas a niche is you're focusing on a problem. And then there's the lifetime client program, the lifetime client model, which is something that we really are trying to encourage lawyers to look at, which is where you have a client that pays you for a defined annual service, either monthly, quarterly, or annually. And that might be something that might be an estate planning support program, a real estate support program, or a corporate support program. And so it's something that you have an annual process in which the clients pay you. Now, one of the things I want to be really clear about is sometimes lawyers go, well, that's me. I have clients. I have lifetime clients. And I always try and remind them that you really don't have lifetime clients unless they're paying you monthly, quarterly, or annually. Because if they're not paying you monthly, quarterly, annually, then you don't have a lifetime support program. You have lifetime friends that are taking advantage of you. Those are not clients. Those are people that are taking advantage of you. That's radically different. So if you look at the idea of a lifetime client model, we want a support program where we're getting a weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually check to provide a support service. That is what I mean by a lifetime client model. Terrific. So that is really the essence of the practice model solution. We covered the concept of the practice model solution. We talked about uniqueness components that you can add to really juice up or jazz up your model. We walked through a worksheet, which I'm not going to spend any time on, but the worksheet's included with this webinar. And the only thing I'd like to talk about towards the end of this is saying, look, if you're going to do this, my suggestion is that you have about 80% of your activities inside key components. So what I mean by that is you can't have, my suggestion in order to be efficient or effective is that you don't want to have 3 different models under the same roof. You want to pick one model and have 80% of your practice around that model, and that will increase your effectiveness and profitability tremendously. Some lawyers will have all these different parts under their model and not appreciate the confusion, the missed messages, the mixed messages, excuse me, and the systemic confusion that multiple practice models cause under the same process. The example that I would use is if you were going to go to a high-end restaurant to enjoy a great dinner out, you wouldn't want perhaps to have a fast food service experience, which would be the typical thing that would be, you'd experience at a McDonald's or Burger King. So you have to think about what the customer's perception of you is and what the customer wants when they walk in the door. So if they're expecting a high-end service, they're willing to pay a high-end price. But if you're trying to do quick, fast, and cheap, that's going to confuse that type of a client tremendously. So in my experience, that you're not going to be able to do both a commodity practice and a expert's expert practice under the same roof. And in many cases, you may not be able to do the experienced practitioner and the expert under the same roof, or the commodity practice under the same roof for that matter, because the clients are confused by your messages. They're coming in looking for one thing, and you're selling something else. So my suggestion would be that I would recommend that if you're new to this concept, that you think through how can I get 80% of my current activities under one of these models, and just try focused activities for a 6-month time period and see what changes for you. I've had practices radically transform when they get really clear about their model, and their messaging and their marketing becomes so much more powerful because they're really clear who they are, who they serve, how they serve them, and it just radically impacts their pricing, radically impacts how they manage the firm, radically impacts how they talk to clients. So obviously, hopefully this wasn't too long for you. This is one of my favorite topics because I really think that the lawyers that embrace this topic, understand this topic, and push it a little bit really have tremendous results quickly. With that being said, I hope that this was an effective use of your time and that you found our review of the practice model solution and the strategies, uniqueness strategies supporting it to be powerful and effective. Thank you for your time and attention, and I look forward to seeing you at your next workshop.